Apologies for being late. We had some late breaking developments, which I will get to. Which I will get to after this. All right. Good afternoon. Saad, Hermiz, Abona, Reham, Al-Farra, Emaad, Ahmed, Salman, Al-Jobory, Raid, Shaka, Mustafa, Al-Mahdawi, Omar, Kahtan, Mohamed, Al-Orfali, Lean, Saad, Al-Quadi, Ramilo Buenaventura, Gillian Clark, Manuel Martin-Oar, Fernandez-Heredia, Arthur Helton, Rick Hooper, Reza Husseini, Ishan Taha Hussein, Jean-Selim Kanan, Christopher Klein-Beekman, Kadir Salim Sahir, Aliyah Ahmad Sousa, Marta Teas, Basim Mahmoud Utawi, Sergio Vieira de Mello, Fiona Watson, and Nadia Yunus. Those are the names of the 22 UN colleagues murdered 20 years ago by the terrorists who attacked the UN headquarters at the Canal Hotel in Baghdad. Since 2009, every August 19th, which is tomorrow, has been designated as World Humanitarian Day. Earlier today, the Undersecretary General, Atul Khare, led remembrance ceremony at UN headquarters in front of the UN flag that flew out on top of the Canal Hotel, which is now displayed in the General Assembly visitors' lobby. In his message for the day, the Secretary General said that this tragedy marked a change in the way humanitarians operate, adding that this year, global humanitarian operations aim to get life-saving aid to 259 million people in 69 countries, 10 times more than at the time of the bombing. He saluted the courage and dedication of humanitarian aid workers everywhere. Today, we remember those 22 colleagues who were killed, and we honor all those who survived that horrific attack, many of whom returned to humanitarian work, some even returned to Iraq to continue to serve the Iraqi people under the auspices of the United Nations. In the words of Kofi Annan, and today marks the 5th anniversary of his passing, the service of the United Nations is not simply a job, it is a calling, and those who have attacked us will not deflect us from it. And we salute and honor all of the humanitarian workers who continue to be targeted around the world, and we salute their dedication. A lot of you have been asking me regularly about where the Special Representative for West Africa and the Sahel, Leonardo Santos Shimao, is. And I can tell you that he is expected to arrive in Niamey in Niger shortly. He's planning to meet with the National Council for the Safeguard of the Homeland, CNSP in a French acronym, the leadership of the CNSP, and other stakeholders. As part of his efforts, Mr. Shimao remains in contact with the member states of ECOWAS, stakeholders in Niger, and other concerned parties to facilitate a swift and peaceful resolution to the crisis in Niger. Before traveling to Niamey, Mr. Shimao concluded a 2-day visit to Mauritania as part of his regional familiarization tour since his appointment. Discussions revolved in Nouakchott around the humanitarian security situation in both national and regional levels, including the political and institutional crisis in Niger. Also in Niger, the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, today expressed his grave concern for the people of Niger who've been forced to endure even more misery following last month's military coup, and he called on the generals to immediately restore constitutional order. Mr. Turk noted that nearly half of the population is mired in extreme poverty, and millions are reliant on humanitarian assistance. Since the coup, their situation has worsened and the country's borders have been shut. Trade has come to a standstill, and there have been severe power cuts, and food prices have risen. The High Commissioner called for the full and free access of humanitarian assistance, including goods, flights, and personnel, to allow critical food, medical, and other relief supplies to reach people in Niger. In Mali, our head of peace operations, Jean-Pierre Lacroix, it continues his visit to the country. Today, he met with members of the UN country team in Bamako and discussed progress over the handover of the task of MINUSMA in light of the mission's withdrawal. The UN country team will continue to oversee programs and activities that were initiated by the peacekeeping mission. Later this afternoon, he has meetings scheduled with senior government officials, including the Ministers of Foreign Affairs and Defense. He will thank the Malian authorities for their continued cooperation, which remains critical in ensuring an orderly and safe withdrawal in short timeline and a very challenging environment, as we've been letting you know. Discussions will also revolve around the handover of key mission tasks to the Malian state, which has expressed its readiness to take them over. Mr. Lacroix will head out of Bamako tomorrow. And in Cyprus, the UN peacekeeping mission there today condemned the assaults against UN peacekeepers and damage to UN vehicles by personnel from the Turkish Cypriot side that took place this morning. The peacekeeping force said that the incident took place inside the buffer zone near the Pilapil area as UN peacekeepers blocked unauthorized construction in the area. The peacekeeping force stressed that threats to the safety of UN peacekeepers and damage to UN property are unacceptable and constitute a serious crime under international law, which will be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. The force called on the Turkish Cypriot side to respect the mission's mandated authority inside the UN buffer zone, refrain from any action that could escalate tensions, and further to withdraw all personnel and machinery from the UN buffer zone immediately. The mission is monitoring the situation closely and remains committed to ensuring calm and the stability be maintained in the area. Have a rather dense and grim humanitarian update from Ethiopia. On the health front, humanitarians are providing medical supplies, logistics support, and risk communications in response to the cholera outbreak in Oromia, Sidama, and the southern nations, nationalities, and peoples regions, as well as Somali regions. According to national authorities, more than 16,800 cases of cholera have been reported, including 212 deaths as of August 2nd. We're also providing medical supplies for the response to malaria, which as of July 30th has impacted over 1.7 million people and claimed 200 lives. On nutrition, more than 30 UN agencies and international and national NGOs are supporting the response to malnutrition, which remains a concern in several regions, including Afar, Amhara, Oromia, Sidama, Southwest, and Tigray. In June and July, more than 26,000 mothers and children received nutrition support in Amhara and southern Oromia. Our humanitarian colleagues are also supporting the food response through the provision of cash to cover basic needs, including food. More than 310,000 people received cash transfers in Somali region, as well as have more than 850,000 men, women, and children in drought-affected regions of Amhara, Oromia, southern nations, nationalities, and peoples region, as well as southwest regions of the country. Our humanitarian colleagues noted that timely food assistance, prepositioning of emergency drugs and medical supplies for impacted people are necessary. More than 1.2 million children suffer from severe acute malnutrition across Ethiopia. As a reminder, the $4 billion humanitarian appeal for 2023 for Ethiopia is only 27% funded. The food sector has received less than 25% of the $2.2 billion required. And also, on a related cholera note, the UN Children's Fund today warned that children in the Democratic Republic of the Congo are facing the worst cholera outbreak in 6 years. UNICEF says the province of North Kivu has seen more than 21,400 confirmed or suspected cases, including more than 8,000 children under five during the first 7 months of this year alone. That's more than 6 times the number of cases of all of last year. On Haiti, our human rights colleagues have issued what one could characterize as a bone-chilling report in which they express concern over reports of extreme brutality and violence in Haiti this week. A report said that on Monday night, a local municipal representative, his wife and child were shot and killed in their house in Port-au-Prince by alleged gang members. Hours earlier, 5 men and 2 women from the same family were burned alive when their home was set on fire by a gang. These individuals were reportedly targeted because of their support for self-defense group. Human Rights Office says that gang violence has intensified in various neighborhoods in Port-au-Prince, saying that some 5,000 people have fled these neighborhoods since last weekend and are either sheltering in improvised sites or with host communities. Volker Turk, the High Commissioner for Human Rights, called for urgent action to be taken on the Secretary General's appeal for a non-UN multinational force to support the Haitian police in addressing the grave security situation and restoring the rule of law. On Ukraine, our humanitarian partners said they're mobilizing more assistance to people in the Kharkiv region in the east, where fighting has recently intensified. This week, 2 interagency convoys delivered 75 tons of food, materials for emergency repairs, hygiene kits, and other essential items to communities on the front lines. One of the convoys reached the city of Kupiansk with supplies for the surrounding areas. Our humanitarian colleagues inform us that civilians in the area have endured weeks of hostilities with damages to houses and other civilian infrastructure and disruption of critical services. Humanitarians are also supporting people being evacuated by the authorities from the frontline areas to Kharkiv city and other safe locations. Around 5,000 people have arrived in Kharkiv over the past few days. Most are taking shelter in displacement centers established by the authorities. Aid organizations, national and international, are providing food, hygiene, and other essential items, in addition to legal and psychological support. Today, the government of Ukraine and the co-chairs of the UN country team's task force on monitoring and reporting, namely the UN resident coordinator and UNICEF representative, signed a joint prevention plan to end and prevent grave violations against children in Ukraine. The UN is committed to providing technical and other support to the government of Ukraine on the implementation of this plan in line with activities included in an agreed work plan. And yesterday, the Security Council met on threats to international peace and security. Izumi Nakamitsu, the High Representative for Disarmament Affairs, noted that since her last briefing to Council members on this topic in June, the provision of military assistance to armed forces of Ukraine has continued in the context of full-fledged invasion of Ukraine by the Russian Federation. She emphasized that reports related to the transfer or use of cluster munitions are very concerning. Her remarks, she also said that continued and intensified attacks against critical infrastructure and services, including energy, infrastructure, health, education facilities, and ports, are alarming. And another update from Lebanon, where UNRWA, our UN humanitarian agency for Palestine refugees, says it's suspending all its services within the Ain el-Hilwe camp in Lebanon to protest against the continued presence of armed fighters in its facilities, including in its schools. The agency says it does not tolerate action that breach the inviolability and neutrality of its installations. UNRWA warned that schools in the camp are unlikely to be available for 3,200 children at the start of the new school year, given the repeated violations, and reiterated a call on armed groups to immediately vacate the facilities to ensure the unhindered delivery of much-needed assistance to Palestine refugees. And in Yemen, another grim humanitarian update. The World Food Programme today announced that it will be forced to make difficult decisions about further cuts to assistance to programs across the country in the coming months, as it's facing a deeper funding crisis for its Yemen operations from the end of September onwards. All of WFP's major programs in Yemen will be impacted, totaling 17.7 million interventions in the first half of this year. Just to give you an idea of the impact on people, WFP has had to make cuts to malnutrition prevention activities in Yemen, which previously targeted 1.4 million people. Because of resource constraints, WFP is only able to assist 128,000 of the 2.4 million children and pregnant and breastfeeding women and girls than it had originally planned. And lastly, senior personnel appointment. Today, Secretary General appointed George Conway of Canada as his Deputy Special Representative and UN Assistance Mission in Somalia and the Resident Coordinator for Somalia. He succeeds Adam Abdelmou of Sudan, who was appointed as Resident Coordinator in Syria, and to whom the Secretary General is grateful. We congratulate Mr. Conway, who is currently serving in that capacity as the acting, in the acting capacity. He is now fully on board, and we congratulate him. Edie.
Hi, Steph. I want to first put on the record how strange it was to attend the official United Nations commemoration for UN Humanitarian Day, marking the 20th anniversary of the bombing of the Canal Hotel in Baghdad, which was the worst attack on UN staff in history, and have the ceremony be totally silent. You read the names here at the start of the noon briefing. Why weren't they read there, and why didn't anybody from the UN speak to mark this major anniversary?
I note what you said.
My question is about Afghanistan. The AP interviewed the spokesman for the Taliban's Ministry of Vice and Virtue, who said that women lose value if men can see their uncovered faces in public, and that if women's faces are visible, there is a possibility of falling into sin. I wondered if the Secretary General had any comment on this.
I don't think I want to engage with this gentleman, and I assume the minister is a gentleman. What I can tell you for our part, we will continue to fight and to advocate to ensure that the women and girls of Afghanistan can benefit from the rights, the human rights, the dignity that they are owed, that they are entitled to. And we ask that all member states do the same. Afghanistan cannot develop without the full participation and the full active participation of its women and girls. Ms. Salome.
Thank you, Steph. I know the Secretary, you've commented on cluster munitions in the past, but given the briefing yesterday and new reports that are out that suggest the death toll from the war in Ukraine is now approaching 500,000, with neither side gaining ground, I'm wondering what the High Representative meant when she said that the increase in cluster munitions is worrying. Can you clarify on that? And does the Secretary General support more weapons going to Ukraine, if not cluster bombs, given the rising death toll and the stalemate?
I think Ms. Nakamitsu's statement was pretty clear. We are firmly against the use of cluster bombs everywhere and anywhere. They're a horrifying tool of war. What we want to see is an end to this conflict within the parameters of relevant General Assembly resolutions and the territorial integrity of Ukraine.
And to follow up, what about the drone strike in Russia? Apparently, a drone was knocked down. Is that kind of attack consistent with international law as well?
We do not want to see any targeting of civilian infrastructure. What we want to see is an end to this conflict. Abdelhamid, nice to see you in 3 dimension.
Thank you. My first question on Niger. Did the UN made its position clear about rejecting the use of force. I know they rejected the coup, and they opposed, the military coup. But did they say that they are not for military intervention or not?
I think what we want to see is a return to the constitutional order. We want to see the liberation of the president and his family, and the restoration of his legitimate authority. We've seen what ECOWAS is discussing. We've also seen what the AU has said. Our focus right now is on doing what we can to see a return to the constitutional order, and I think it's in parallel and as important, meeting the humanitarian needs of the millions of people in Niger.
My second question, Smotrich, the finance minister of Israel, said in a statement that they will assign hundreds of millions of shekels to deepen and expand settlement activities, including the outpost. That is the statement. Do you have any comment on that?
I haven't seen that statement. Regardless, our position against settlements in the occupied Palestinian territory remains unchanged, and the illegality of such settlements. Dulcie and then Yvonne.
Okay, thanks. The UN report commissioned by Kofi Annan about the Canal Hotel bombing has never been fully declassified. Would the Secretary General be willing to make that step? Because there's a lot of information that's unknown to the public.
I don't know if there's been any change. I'm not aware of any change in policy regarding the various reports. There was a lot of material was made public at the time.
But there's one major report looking at the security situation.
At this point, I'm not aware of any change in the policy.
Okay, I have a separate question. So what is the status of the deposed president of Niger? Because the UN put out a notice maybe a week ago saying he had no water, no food, and no electricity. So
I mean, we continue through various channels on in being in contact with him. I don't have a health update. It's not for me to share his health update, but we know there have been regular contacts with him.
So he's still alive? Does he have...
As far as, I mean, I've spoken to someone who speaks to him regularly, and yes, he is, as far as we know, and we have no indication to say that he's not alive. So as far as I know, he's alive. I don't want it to be misinterpreted. Yvonne.
Thanks. It's just a follow-up on my question yesterday about the discovery of mass graves in West Darfur. Any more details that the UN can provide?
No, we're in touch with our human rights colleagues. I think the fact that this continues to be there continues to be a high level of violence and conflict makes it difficult and challenging to get to places and to see exactly what is happening. Let's start round two. Edie and then Kristen.
Thank you, Steph. A follow-up on Mr. Santos Shamal's visit. I assume that his meeting with the committee, that group has been prearranged. What message is he going to deliver to them?
Our message are unchanged. Return to the constitutional order and release the president. Kristen.
Just a point of clarification on Haiti. When you were talking about the municipal rep that was killed and the family and that, they were for supporting a defense group, is that like private security?
No, there's been, from what I understand, there have been, as a result of gang violence, we've seen a number of self-defense and so-called vigilante groups who have formed in order to defend their communities from gang violence. All of this due to a void of enough state authority and enough police authority to actually keep law and order in Haiti. Okay, I don't see a question. Thank you all. And Paulina, I thank you because you're going to brief now.